Well, over the weekend was not just what was, as we said last video, the ultimate disaster, if not one of the biggest diplomatic disasters for the UK, easily since Suez, if not probably rivaling Suez in the damage that Boris Johnson has indeed done to the country as well as the rest of the Brexiteers. We also got the launch, shall we say, because that's the best way to describe it. Although it did not go with a bang, but with a whimper. And of course, we are talking about GB News. Yes, GB News officially launched this weekend and is now broadcasting almost, I think, 24/7. Again, that's a lot of airtime to fill for, again, the nonsense that they've got to put out. But oh boy, where there's money to be thrown at something, then this ultimately has been definitely it. And I think a lot of money has been thrown at this. And I've seen a lot of people say, what's the point of this news channel after watching it? And I agree. And a lot of people are betting that this won't last a year. However, I think that GB News has had so much money thrown at it, it will just not be allowed to fail. I think we're talking at least 3 to 4 years to see how long it will last. But if it does go as bad and as a lot of people have said, even myself watching it very, very briefly, it may very well only last a year, but I highly suspect, because of the amount of money that's involved in this, I think this could last a lot longer. So before we do jump into today's article, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And also the YouTube memberships are now open as well. So on with today's article, which is again reviewing GB News, or Andrew Neil's alternative BBC. So, now is the time to do news differently, said Andrew Neil, as GB News went live on Sunday night. We are committed to covering the people's agenda, not the media's agenda. Not in this first hour. You weren't. Instead, Neil spent it by introducing his new colleagues, while be still the irony of this, inciting the woke numpties from traditional news channels stuck in the narcissistic Westminster bubble. There haven't been many news breaks during the hour. Indeed, it was a scrolling all by on the ticker at the bottom of the screen, but it all went unreported. No matter though, because first up was Neil Oliver, the former BBC archaeology presenter turned GB News current affairs presenter, whom Neil introduced as the King of Scotland. An ill-omened title, given that the last title holder was Ilan Amin. I seem to have come to the fore with opinions, he told Andrew Neil. People talk to me and all the time, and when they come up to me, they're always wagging the dogs. They no longer feel that their voices or voices like theirs are out in the mainstream. The thing to do, Neil baby, is not to slow down. When asked which 3 words would sum up his new employer, Oliver replied with this: truth at last. The implication, of course, was that the British Biased Corporation and Channel 4 Lies was stuffed as much with strange waves and smug PC that they make Owen Jones read like Tommy Robinson, and they are more out of touch with people like him, who have spent the most successful part of their careers having their hair implacably conditioned over the licence payers' fees expense. Oliver, it's worth saying, told the Herald last week that the lockdown was, quote, the biggest single mistake in world history. To be fair, Oliver had forgotten his new beard. The other presenters gave their 3 little words to characterise what GB News means to them. Good news now, said Becca Hudson, told the channel's website, with fingers crossed, meanings that there's an airlifting news cruise from Syria to Sabatan to get the scoop on the cute kitten rescued from the tree story. The fresh, experienced and challenging, said Alexa Stewart, the ex-ITV news anchor, who has been the second and third of those words for many, many years. The most recent, most resonant discussion, however, came from the channel's economist and business editor. Liam Hillingham said the British unbiased and welcoming. But that creates the kind of philosophical problem that comedian Andrew Doyle, presenter of GB News Free Nation Britain, might wish to actually address in his show. Can a channel that postures an unbiased correct bias actually cover itself without becoming biased? Probably not. But the claim to be unbiased is very risible. In the second hour, Dan Walton raged against extending the lockdown, inducing that Britain should follow Texas, Florida and Sweden instead of becoming a biosecurity state copying China, which is basically just not biased, it's just very, very silly. After 10 p.m, Alan Sugar fielded the viewer questions from his computer in Chigwell, where, jumping from his Zoom backdrop, he spent lockdown building a super swagged Benidorm tent in his back garden. God love him. Like the Exeter Sauerkrauts or Manuel in Fawlty Towers, Lord Sugar had nothing to declare but his ignorance. Asked about the prospect of extending lockdown, he replied, "I have no clue when it comes to trying to bring this thing to an end. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, and the thing is, it changes every day, and I have no idea." Well, thanks for your insights, Lord Sugar. What about taking the knee? Asked another. Where would I take the knee? Sainsbury's? He then told us about his knee op, and like some old grandad leaning on the garden fence at the long close of the day, you wish you were somewhere else. And did anyone else say appointment to view TV? No, they really did not. It was a completely and utterly dismal segment, apart from when Lord Sugar had a question for one of the channel's hosts, Apprentice winner Michelle Dewberry. He said, "I noticed there's been no advertisements yet. How are you going to make your revenue?" Dewberry actually couldn't answer this question because it was time to get in the body language expert. When they were going to tell us whether Joe Biden really does like Boris Johnson, which is certainly not news, which is certainly doing news differently, or rather, not doing it at all. And here's another philosophical question: can GB News actually change Britain's news agenda if no one watches it? The answer is incredibly yes. Wired magazine recently reported that GB News will be a success if it has reach rather than ratings, which means if it creates a controversy through interviews and reportage, it will create news or the clickbait semblance of it. That certainly would be doing news differently, but I'm not sure GB News has yet the personnel to actually deliver on that business model. GB News' biggest problem is that the elephant isn't in the room, and that is, of course, Piers Morgan, the man for whom GB News could have been and perhaps was invented for, but has not even yet been signed up, nor has another anti-woke tabloid bruiser, Nick Ferrari, who GB News sought to lure from LBC, where the breakfast bulldog is renowned for eviscerating politicians, exposing, for instance, Diane Abbott's innumeracy, and of course there are A-listers of the GB News, if it needs it, to produce the reach as well as ratings, and there's a danger that it could have neither, which, to be honest, will be good for it. As for reporting on the, quote, people's agenda, GB News aims to deliver it by unmuffling the muffled voices, as presenter Nina Aku put it. A noble aim, but in practice, this policy so far means that stories on the channel's website, such as headlines to trailblazing Teesside, have been ignored for too long. If this is doing news differently, it is not different in mistaking local puffy news stories for national significance. Another story championing the neglected North East was equally fallacious. The East Midlands Airport is the only second to Heathrow in terms of cargo, reporter Halcyon South put it. More on that, please. 40 years ago, the Social Democratic Party sought to break the British mould of politics. Its so-called Gang of Four split from the Labour Party, and they thought they'd gone too far left. GB News is effectively TV's answer to the SDP. The current disgruntled BBC exiles who make up the backbone of GB News, Andrew Neil as Roy Jenkins and Neil Oliver as David Owen, and Andrew Doyle as the brains of the operation, i.e. Shirley Williams, risk having made a completely terrible misjudgment. This feels akin to the Gang of Fours not actually breaking the mould, but rather destroying their careers while leaving everything else pretty much as it was. My 3 words to this would be response: a year at tops. So, yeah, it was absolutely flabbergasting to watch. Like I say, I tuned in and saw the Lord Sugar segment, and yeah, it was awful. I've never seen anything quite like it. It was absolutely dismal. And I turned off 10 minutes in. And bear in mind, I'm running a poll at the moment on my Patreon page where one of the choices to cover next Wednesday is GB News. So maybe by then they'll have actually sorted out what they are going to do with this news channel. We'll have to see, but again, at least it should hopefully makes for some interesting content to cover in the future. But like I say, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But as always, thank you for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy me a coffee. And also the YouTube memberships are open as well. So as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you all next time.